The rain hammered down on Catherine Zimmerman's shoulders as she stumbled through the muddy streets of Dallas, Texas, clutching the wailing infant against her chest. Her dress soaked through, and her boots caked with red clay that sucked at her feet with every desperate step forward. It was May of 1873, and the spring storms had turned the frontier town into a quagmire of misery. But the weather was the least of her troubles as she searched frantically for shelter, for help, for anything that might save her and the baby from the fate that pursued them. She had been walking for 3 days since the stagecoach accident that killed her sister Sarah. 3 days of hiding in ravines and abandoned shacks. 3 days of feeding the baby with water-soaked cloth because she had nothing else to give. The child was her nephew, barely 6 months old, with his mother dead and his father already 2 years in the grave from consumption. Catherine had no money, no family left except this squalling bundle, and nowhere to go except forward into the storm. The houses on the outskirts of Dallas were sparse, separated by stretches of scrubland and mud. Most had their shutters closed against the weather, their occupants huddled inside where it was warm and dry. Catherine's vision blurred with rain and exhaustion as she spotted a modest ranch house set back from the road, lamplight glowing behind its windows like a beacon. She had knocked on 4 doors already that evening, only to be turned away by suspicious faces who wanted nothing to do with a desperate woman and a crying baby. But she had no choice except to try again. Her knuckles rapped weakly against the wooden door, barely audible over the drumming rain. The baby's cries had diminished to weak whimpers, and that terrified her more than the screaming had. She knocked again, harder this time, putting the last of her strength into it. The door swung open to reveal a tall man in his mid-20s, broad-shouldered with dark hair that fell across his forehead, and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He wore a simple cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up and denim pants, his feet bare as though he had been settling in for the evening. His expression shifted from annoyance to concern in the space of a heartbeat as he took in the sight of her dripping form and the bundle in her arms. "Please," Catherine managed, her voice barely a whisper. "The baby needs warmth. He needs help." Austin Garrett did not hesitate. "Come in, both of you," he said, stepping back and opening the door wider. His voice was deep and steady, and something in its certainty made Catherine's knees nearly buckle with relief as she stumbled across the threshold. The interior of the house was simple but clean, with a stone fireplace crackling cheerfully against the far wall. Austin closed the door behind them, shutting out the howl of wind and rain, and the sudden silence was almost overwhelming. Catherine stood dripping on his floor, swaying slightly, too exhausted to do more than hold the baby. "Here, let me," Austin said, reaching for the child with gentle hands. Catherine's arms tightened instinctively, but something in his calm demeanor made her trust him. She relinquished her nephew into his care and watched as the cowboy carried the baby closer to the fire, unwrapping the soaked blankets with practiced efficiency. "You have children?" Catherine asked, her voice hoarse. "No, madam, but I helped birth enough calves and foals to know a little one needs warmth and dryness first thing." He glanced up at her. "You look about ready to fall over yourself. There are dry clothes in the chest by the wall. Take what you need." Catherine's face flushed hot despite her chill. "I could not possibly. You will catch your death standing there in wet things, and then what good will you be to this little fellow?" Austin's tone was matter-of-fact rather than forward, and Catherine found herself moving toward the chest before she had consciously decided to do so. She found a worn cotton shirt that fell to her knees and a pair of trousers that she had to roll up several times. There was a screen in the corner where she could change with some privacy, and she peeled off her sodden dress with fingers so cold they barely functioned. The dry clothes felt like heaven against her chilled skin, even if they hung on her slender frame. When she emerged, Austin had wrapped the baby in what looked like a flannel shirt and was examining him with focused attention. "He does not seem injured, just cold and hungry. What has he been eating?" "Nothing," Catherine admitted, moving closer to the fire. The heat made her skin prickle painfully as sensation returned. "His mother died 3 days ago in a stagecoach accident. We were traveling from Fort Worth to stay with family in Waco, but the coach overturned in a flash flood. My sister Sarah, she hit her head on a rock. She died before I could get help." Austin's expression softened with sympathy. "I am sorry for your loss. What about the driver, the other passengers?" "There were only the three of us and the driver. He survived but rode off to get help and never came back. I waited as long as I could, but Sarah was gone and the baby was crying, and I knew if I stayed there we would both die too." The words tumbled out in a rush, as though now that she had started, she could not stop. "I started walking, following the road markers. I thought I could reach Dallas and find help, find someone who could tell me how to get to Waco, but then the storms came and I got turned around and I have been lost for days." "You are safe now," Austin said firmly. "Both of you. First thing is to get some food into this little one. I have milk from my cow. It is not mother's milk, but it is better than nothing." He moved with quiet competence, warming milk in a pan over the fire and testing the temperature against his wrist before soaking a clean cloth in it. The baby latched onto the makeshift feeding device with desperate hunger, sucking weakly but steadily. Catherine sank down onto a wooden chair, watching in amazement as this stranger tended to her nephew with such care. "What is his name?" Austin asked. "Thomas. Tommy, we called him." Catherine's voice broke slightly. "Sarah loved him so much. She was all I had left after our parents died of cholera 2 years back. Her husband died before Tommy was even born. We were going to Waco because Sarah's husband's family offered to take us in to help raise Tommy." "Will they still take you, you think?" Catherine's shoulders sagged. "I do not know. I never met them. All the arrangements were made by letter. I do not even know if they will believe me about Sarah's death, or if they will think I am some stranger trying to claim their grandson." Austin was quiet for a moment, focused on feeding Tommy. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "Dallas is not such a bad place to be. There are good people here, opportunities for those willing to work." "I have no money," Catherine said bluntly. "Everything we had was in the stagecoach, and I could not carry it all while carrying Tommy. I took what I could, but it was not much, and I lost most of it crossing a creek 2 days ago." "Then you will stay here until we figure out what to do," Austin said, as though it were the most natural thing in the world to invite two strangers into his home. Catherine stared at him. "I cannot impose on you like that. You do not even know me. I know you walked for 3 days through storms to keep a baby safe. I know you knocked on my door asking for help for him, not for yourself first. That tells me enough." He looked up at her, and his green eyes were steady and kind. "I am Austin Garrett. I run cattle on the land about 2 miles out of town. This is my house, such as it is, and you are welcome in it for as long as you need." "Catherine Zimmerman," she managed, "and I do not know how I will ever repay your kindness. Let us worry about repayment after we have gotten you both fed and rested." He stood, still cradling Tommy against his shoulder. "There is a bedroom through that door. It is not much, but the bed is clean and dry. You should sleep. What about you? I will keep the little one out here by the fire for tonight. Make sure he stays warm and get more food into him. You look about ready to collapse, Miss Zimmerman. Go rest." Catherine wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like an undertow. She nodded, taking a few steps toward the bedroom before turning back. "Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Truly." "Austin," he corrected gently. "And you are welcome, Catherine." She slept for 14 hours straight, waking to sunlight streaming through the bedroom window and the sound of a baby cooing. Panic seized her for a moment before memory returned, and she stumbled out of bed, her borrowed clothes rumpled and her hair a wild tangle around her shoulders. In the main room, she found Austin sitting in a rocking chair with Tommy on his lap, bouncing the baby gently while humming some tuneless melody. The cowboy looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes, but he smiled when he saw her. "Good morning. There is coffee on the stove and cornbread from last night if you are hungry." Catherine poured herself coffee with shaking hands, the rich smell making her stomach clench with sudden hunger. She had not realized how starved she was until food was available. The cornbread was dense and filling, and she ate 3 pieces before her manners caught up with her appetite. "You stayed up with him all night?" she asked, noting Austin's rumpled appearance. He woke a few times, needed feeding and changing. Nothing too troublesome. Austin stood carefully, settling Tommy into a makeshift cradle he had apparently constructed from a drawer and some blankets. "I need to tend to my animals, but I should not be more than an hour. Will you be all right here?" "Of course." Catherine moved to look down at Tommy, who blinked up at her with Sarah's blue eyes. Her heart clenched painfully. "I can manage. It is the least I can do after you gave us shelter." Austin nodded and headed out, pulling on boots and a worn leather vest. After he left, Catherine explored the house more thoroughly. It was a bachelor's dwelling, to be sure, with minimal decoration and a practical arrangement of furniture, but it was clean and well-maintained. There were books on a shelf by the fireplace, which surprised her. She ran her fingers over the spines, finding works by Dickens and Hawthorne alongside farming manuals and a worn Bible. She set about tidying what little mess there was, heating water to wash the dishes from the previous evening. Tommy dozed in his drawer cradle, and Catherine found herself humming the same tuneless melody Austin had been singing earlier. The domesticity of the moment was strange and comforting in equal measure. Austin returned as promised, his boots muddy and his hair windblown. The storm passed, but it left everything a mess. The creek is running high, nearly flooded its banks. "Is that dangerous?" Catherine asked, looking up from where she was folding the blankets that had been used for Tommy. "Can be if it gets much higher. But the rain has stopped, so it should recede in a day or two." He washed his hands in the basin by the door. "I was thinking if you are set on getting to Waco, we should send a telegraph to your sisters-in-laws, let them know what happened and that you and Tommy are safe." Catherine bit her lip. "I have no money for a telegraph. I will cover it. Consider it a loan if you must, but those people deserve to know about their son's death and their grandson's survival." "You are too generous, Austin." "I am practical," he corrected. "If they want you to come to Waco, they can send money for the journey. If they do not, then you will need to make other arrangements, and the sooner we know which it is, the better." His logic was sound, though Catherine felt a knot of anxiety at the thought of contacting Sarah's in-laws. Still, she nodded agreement, and after a quick meal of beans and salt pork, they walked into Dallas proper, with Catherine carrying Tommy wrapped in clean blankets. The town was busier than it had been in the storm, with people going about their business under a watery sun. The telegraph office was a small building near the center of town, run by a balding man with spectacles who eyed Catherine and the baby with open curiosity. Austin dictated the message while Catherine held Tommy close, trying to ignore the whispers from other patrons in the office. Small towns were ripe ground for gossip, and she knew how this must look. A strange woman with a baby showing up at a bachelor's house. Her reputation would be in tatters if she stayed much longer. The telegraph was sent to the Hoffman family in Waco, explaining Sarah's death and asking for instructions regarding Catherine and Tommy. Austin paid the fee without comment, and they left the office under the weight of many stares. "People are talking," Catherine murmured as they walked back toward Austin's house. "Let them talk. You have done nothing wrong. But your reputation will survive just fine." He glanced at her, his expression serious. "I will not turn you out to satisfy town gossips, Catherine. You and Tommy need somewhere safe to stay, and I have the room. That is all that matters." His certainty was both comforting and unsettling. Catherine had known this man for barely a day, yet he showed more kindness than she had received from family members who had turned their backs after her parents died. It made her want to trust him, even as caution warned her to be wary. Over the next several days, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Catherine tended to Tommy and managed the house, cooking meals and keeping things tidy. Austin worked his cattle and horses, often gone for long hours but always returning with a smile for her and a gentle word for the baby. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes simply existing in companionable silence. Catherine learned that Austin had come to Texas from Missouri 5 years earlier, seeking land and opportunity. He had built his ranch through hard work and careful savings, starting with just a few head of cattle and slowly building his herd. He was well respected in Dallas, known for his honesty and his skill with horses. "You never get lonely out here by yourself?" Catherine asked one evening as she mended one of his shirts, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. Austin considered the question, his gaze on the fire. "Sometimes, but I always figured loneliness was better than settling for the wrong person just to have company." "That is wise, I suppose. Is it?" "Sometimes I wonder if I am just too particular." He looked at her then, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "What about you? Was there ever anyone back in Fort Worth?" Catherine shook her head. "There was a boy once, before my parents died. But after the cholera took them, his family thought Sarah and I were bad luck. He stopped calling." The memory still stung, even years later. "Sarah said we were better off without people who only cared for us when times were easy. Your sister sounds like she was a smart woman." "She was." Catherine's eyes burned with unshed tears. She deserved better than to die on the side of a muddy road. Austin reached over and covered her hand with his, the gesture brief but warm. "She would be proud of how you have taken care of her son." The telegraph reply came 6 days after they had sent the initial message. Austin collected it from town and brought it back to the ranch with a troubled expression. Catherine's hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. The Hoffman family expressed their condolences for Sarah's death, but stated plainly that they had no interest in taking in Catherine or Thomas. They had agreed to help Sarah because she was their son's widow, but they saw no obligation to a stranger and a baby they had never met. The message was cold and final. Catherine read it twice before the words fully penetrated. Then she sat down heavily, Tommy cradled against her chest. "They do not want us." "Then they are fools," Austin said flatly. "What kind of people turn away their own grandson?" "The kind who never wanted to be bothered in the first place, I imagine." Catherine's voice was hollow. "Sarah was always better at seeing the good in people than I was. She truly believed they would welcome us." "What will you do?" It was the question Catherine had been dreading. She looked around Austin's modest house, at the man who had shown her more kindness than her own family, and felt desperation claw at her throat. "I do not know. I have no money, no prospects. I cannot impose on your hospitality forever." "Why not?" She stared at him. "What?" Austin sat down across from her, his expression earnest. "Why can you not stay? I have the room and you have been managing the house better than I ever did on my own. Tommy seems settled. It makes sense. Austin, people are already talking. If I stay here unchaperoned, then we get married. The words hung in the air between them like something solid and real. Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. You cannot be serious. I am perfectly serious. He leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. I know it is sudden, and I know we barely know each other. But Catherine, you need security and a home for Tommy. I need help running this place, and if I am being honest, I need company too. We get along well enough. We could make it work. That is not a reason to get married, Catherine protested, even as part of her yearned to say yes, to accept the safety and stability he offered. Maybe not the romantic reason poets write about, Austin admitted, but it is an honest one. I like you, Catherine. I admire how you have handled everything that has been thrown at you. I think we could build something good together, given time. And I know I would be proud to be a father to Tommy, to give him a name and a home. Catherine looked down at the baby in her arms, at his innocent face and trusting eyes. What kind of life could she give him on her own, with no money and no family? She could try to find work, but who would hire a woman with an infant? She could end up in a much worse situation, dependent on people far less kind than Austin Garrett. And if she was being truthful with herself, the idea of marrying Austin was not unwelcome. He was a good man, steady and kind and capable. She felt safe with him in a way she had not felt safe since before her parents died. Perhaps love could grow from such foundations. Are you certain? She asked quietly. This would change everything for you. You would be taking on responsibilities you never asked for. I am certain, Austin said firmly, if you will have me. Catherine took a deep breath, feeling as though she stood on the edge of a cliff ready to jump. Then yes, I will marry you, Austin Garrett. His smile was like sunrise, warm and bright. He reached out and took her free hand in both of his grip gentle but sure. You will not regret this, Catherine. I promise you that. They were married 3 days later by the circuit preacher who passed through Dallas, with the general store owner and his wife standing as witnesses. Catherine wore a simple blue dress borrowed from the wife, and Austin wore his best shirt, his hair neatly combed. Tommy dozed through the ceremony, oblivious to the way his world was being transformed. The town gossips were surprised by the sudden wedding, but most agreed it was the respectable thing to do, given that Catherine had been staying at Austin's ranch. A few of the older women clucked their tongues about hasty decisions, but for the most part, people accepted the new Mr. and Mrs. Garrett with equanimity. Austin had said they would take things slowly, that Catherine could have the bedroom, and he would sleep on a cot in the main room until she felt comfortable with a true marriage. But on their wedding night, after Tommy was settled in his cradle and the house was quiet, Catherine found herself standing in the doorway between the two rooms, her heart in her throat. Austin. He looked up from where he was spreading blankets on the cot, his expression questioning. You are my husband now, Catherine said softly. You do not need to sleep out here. Something warm and hopeful flickered in his green eyes. Are you sure? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Austin came to her, moving slowly as though afraid to spook her. He touched her face with gentle fingers, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. I meant what I said about taking our time, he murmured. There is no rush for anything you are not ready for. I know. Catherine covered his hand with hers, but I want to try. I want this to be a real marriage, Austin. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Catherine felt something unfurl in her chest like a flower opening to the sun. They moved together into the bedroom, closing the door behind them, and in the darkness, Catherine discovered that perhaps the poets were not so wrong after all. Perhaps love could bloom suddenly and unexpectedly, born from kindness and trust, and the simple act of opening a door to someone in need. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Catherine had expected marriage to be an arrangement of convenience, a practical solution to her desperate circumstances. What she found instead was a partnership that grew deeper with each passing day. Austin taught her to ride, patiently correcting her seat and showing her how to read a horse's moods. She discovered she had a knack for it, and soon she was accompanying him on shorter rides around the property, Tommy strapped against her chest in a sling Austin fashioned from canvas. In turn, Catherine brought warmth and life to the ranch house. She planted a garden near the kitchen, coaxing vegetables from the Texas soil. She made curtains for the windows and taught Austin card games her father had shown her as a child. At night, they would lie together in the darkness, talking about their days, their dreams, their fears. "I never thought I would have this," Austin confessed one night, his arm around her shoulders as she rested against his chest. "A wife, a child, a real family." "Tommy is not your blood," Catherine reminded him gently, though the baby certainly seemed to think Austin was his father, reaching for the cowboy whenever he entered a room. "Blood does not make a family. Love does. And I love that little boy as surely as if I had helped bring him into this world." Austin pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I love you too, Catherine. I know we married for practical reasons, but what I feel for you now is anything but practical." Catherine's heart swelled. She had been feeling the same way, had fallen in love with her husband somewhere between the quiet mornings making coffee together and the evenings rocking Tommy to sleep while Austin read aloud from his books. "I love you too," she whispered. "So much it frightens me sometimes." "Why frightening?" "Because I lost everyone else I ever loved. My parents, Sarah, even that boy back in Fort Worth in a different way. What if I lose you too?" Austin tightened his arms around her. "You will not lose me. I am not going anywhere, Catherine. This is where I belong, right here with you and Tommy." Summer turned to fall, and the Texas heat gave way to cooler temperatures. Tommy grew and thrived, learning to sit up on his own and babbling nonsense syllables that Catherine and Austin interpreted as profound statements. The ranch prospered too, with Austin selling several head of cattle at good prices and investing in more grazing land. Catherine made friends with some of the other ranch wives, women who came calling with welcoming baskets and curious eyes. She was careful to present a united front with Austin, to show the world a happy marriage, but the truth was she did not need to pretend. Her happiness was real and growing. In October, Catherine realized she had missed her monthly courses. She said nothing at first, not wanting to raise hopes that might be dashed, but when a second month passed and nausea began to plague her mornings, she could no longer deny the truth. She told Austin one evening after Tommy was asleep, her hands twisted nervously in her apron. "I think I am with child." Austin's eyes widened, and then a grin spread across his face so wide it must have hurt. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop before she was sick on his boots. "A baby," he breathed, setting her down gently and placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Catherine asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. Happy does not begin to cover it. He kissed her soundly. "You have given me everything, Catherine. A home, a family, and now this. I am the luckiest man in Texas." "I am the lucky one," she corrected. "You saved me and Tommy when we had nowhere else to turn. You gave us a life when we had nothing." "We saved each other," Austin said firmly, "and we are building this life together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, despite Catherine's worries. She had seen too many women suffer in childbirth, had lost her own mother to complications when she was young. But Austin was attentive and caring. taking on more of the heavy work around the ranch and insisting Catherine rest whenever she looked tired. Tommy was walking by the time Catherine's belly began to swell noticeably, toddling around the house on unsteady legs and getting into everything. He called Austin Papa and Catherine Mama, and if he remembered anything of his birth mother, he gave no sign. Catherine told him stories about Sarah sometimes, wanting him to know that his mother had loved him, but in all the ways that mattered, Tommy was theirs now. The baby was born on a warm spring evening in 1874, almost exactly a year after Catherine had knocked on Austin's door in the rain. The labor was long and difficult, attended by the local midwife and two neighboring ranch wives who had become Catherine's friends. Austin paced outside, holding Tommy and wearing a track in the dirt, until one of the women emerged to tell him he had a son. He rushed inside to find Catherine exhausted but smiling, cradling a red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair. "His name is Samuel," she said softly. "Samuel Austin Garrett." "Samuel," Austin repeated, his voice thick with emotion. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, looking between his wife and his newborn son with wonder. "He is perfect. He has your nose," Catherine observed, tracing the baby's tiny features. "Poor child," Austin joked, but his eyes were wet with tears. Tommy peered at his new brother with curiosity, poking Samuel's cheek with one finger. "Baby," he announced solemnly. "That is right, Tommy, your baby brother." Catherine reached out to ruffle her nephew's hair, her son's hair. Both of them were her sons now, in every way that mattered. The months after Samuel's birth were chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. Catherine had her hands full with an infant and a toddler, while Austin worked to expand the ranch to support their growing family. They hired a ranch hand named Miguel, a quiet man in his 40s who was good with horses and did not mind the hard work. With Miguel's help, Austin was able to spend more time with his family, teaching Tommy to ride a gentle mare and helping Catherine with the endless tasks that came with two small children. Their evenings were loud and messy, full of laughter and the occasional tears, and Catherine could not remember ever being happier. She thought of Sarah often, wishing her sister could see how Tommy had grown, how loved he was. She hoped that wherever Sarah was, she could see that her son was thriving, that he had a good father and a safe home and a brother to grow up alongside. "You think she would approve?" Catherine asked Austin one night after the boys were finally asleep. "Sarah, I mean. Do you think she would be glad I married you and made a life here?" Austin pulled her close. "I think she would be grateful you found happiness and gave Tommy a good home. That is what any mother would want for her child." "I hope so." Catherine rested her head on his shoulder. "I want him to know he was loved from the very beginning by Sarah and by us. He will know. We will make sure of it." 2 years later, Catherine gave birth to twin girls, Clara and Caroline, who had their mother's blonde hair and their father's green eyes. The ranch house suddenly felt very full, bursting with children and noise and life. Austin built an addition, adding 2 more bedrooms so the children would have space to grow. Tommy was 5 now, a sturdy boy who followed Austin everywhere and declared he would be a rancher when he grew up. Samuel was a quieter child, more likely to be found looking at picture books than playing in the dirt. But he adored his older brother and tried to copy everything Tommy did. The twins were still babies, but already their personalities were emerging. Clara bold and adventurous, Caroline sweet and gentle. Catherine sometimes stood in the doorway watching her family and felt overwhelmed by how much her life had changed. 7 years ago, she had been a desperate woman with a dying sister and a starving baby, knocking on a stranger's door in the rain. Now she had a husband she loved deeply, 4 children, a prosperous ranch, and a community of friends. What are you thinking about?" Austin asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "How lucky I am. How far we have come." "We have built something good here," Austin agreed. "Better than I ever imagined possible. Do you ever regret it, taking us in that night?" He turned her to face him, his expression serious. "Not for a single moment. You and Tommy showing up on my doorstep was the best thing that ever happened to me. You gave my life meaning, Catherine. You made this house a home." She kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. "I love you, Austin Garrett. I love you too, Catherine Garrett. Today, tomorrow, and all the days after." The years continued to pass in a blur of growth and change. Tommy grew into a tall, capable young man who worked the ranch alongside his father with pride and skill. Samuel discovered a talent for numbers and helped manage the ranch's finances, keeping meticulous records of sales and purchases. The twins were a whirlwind of energy, learning to ride almost before they could walk properly and keeping their parents constantly on their toes. In 1881, when Catherine was 32 and Austin 33, they welcomed another son, Daniel. He was their fifth child, and Catherine laughingly declared him their last, though Austin just smiled and said they would see what the future brought. The ranch had grown into one of the most successful operations in the Dallas area. Austin's reputation for honesty and quality livestock meant he had buyers from as far as Fort Worth and San Antonio. They had built a good life through hard work and determination, and their children were reaping the benefits of that labor. Tommy, now 13, sometimes asked about his birth mother. Catherine told him everything she remembered about Sarah, her kindness, her strength, her love for her son. She showed him the few belongings she had managed to save from the stagecoach accident, including a locket with Sarah's picture. "She would be so proud of you," Catherine said, watching emotions play across Tommy's face as he studied the photograph. "You have grown into such a fine young man." "I wish I could remember her," Tommy admitted. "You were too young, but she loved you, Tommy. She died trying to protect you in that accident, and she would be grateful that you have had a good life, that Austin has been such a wonderful father to you." "He is my father," Tommy said firmly. "Blood or not, he is my father, but I am glad to know about her, about where I came from." "You came from love," Catherine said softly. "That is where all of you came from. Love and hope, and a rainy night when I knocked on a cowboy's door and he said the words that changed everything." Tommy smiled. "Come in, both of you." "Exactly." As the years rolled on, Catherine and Austin's love deepened into something unshakable and eternal. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, sick children and financial worries, the normal trials of running a ranch and raising a family. Through it all, they remained partners in the truest sense, supporting each other and building a legacy together. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1883, Austin took Catherine to Dallas for a rare evening alone. Miguel and his wife, Maria, who had become part of their extended family, watched the children while Austin and Catherine dined at the nicest restaurant in town and danced to music from a traveling band. "You remember our wedding?" Catherine asked as they swayed together, her head resting on his shoulder. "I remember thinking I was the luckiest man alive to have you agree to marry me." "I was terrified," Catherine admitted. "I barely knew you, and I was agreeing to tie my life to yours forever. Are you still terrified?" She pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining. "No. Now I cannot imagine my life any other way. You are my best friend, Austin. My partner, my love, the father of my children. You are everything." He kissed her there in the middle of the dance floor, not caring who saw. "You are my everything too, Catherine. You and those wild children of ours." They laughed together, and Catherine felt her heart overflow with joy. This was what happiness looked like. Not a fairy tale, but something real and earned and precious. A love built on trust and respect, and the courage to open a door to strangers in need. The children grew and thrived. Tommy eventually took over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch, proving himself a natural leader and skilled cattleman. At 20, he married a sweet girl named Elizabeth from a neighboring ranch, and they built a house on the far edge of Austin and Catherine's property, staying close to family while establishing their own household. Samuel pursued an education, traveling to Houston to study business and returning to Dallas to work at the bank while still helping with the ranch finances in his spare time. He married at 23, choosing a schoolteacher named Margaret who shared his love of books and quiet evenings. The twins were still young, only 15, but already they showed signs of following their own paths. Clara wanted to train horses professionally, while Caroline had declared her intention to become a doctor, shocking and delighting her parents in equal measure. Daniel, the baby, was 8 now, and showing signs of being the most adventurous of all the Garrett children, constantly climbing trees and exploring the far reaches of the property. In the summer of 1890, Catherine and Austin celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Tommy and Elizabeth had 2 sons of their own now, and watching Austin play with his grandsons made Catherine's heart ache with love. "We did well," she said to Sarah in her mind, looking at Tommy laughing with his father and his own children. "Your son has had a beautiful life. I hope you can see it wherever you are." That evening, after the celebration had wound down and the family had dispersed to their various homes, Catherine and Austin sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sun set over the Texas landscape they had worked so hard to tame and cultivate. "I was thinking," Austin said, his hand finding Catherine's and lacing their fingers together, "about that night you showed up at my door. I think about it often," Catherine admitted. "If I had turned you away, if I had been like those other people who closed their doors on you, my entire life would be different. I would have missed out on everything that matters. And Tommy and I would have died in the storm, most likely." Catherine shuddered at the thought. "Or we would have ended up in some terrible situation. You saved us, Austin." "No," he said firmly. "We saved each other. You brought light and love into my lonely existence. You gave me purpose and family and joy. I was just existing before you, Catherine. You taught me how to truly live." She turned to him, tears streaming down her face, and kissed him with all the passion and love of their 17 years together. "I love you so much, more now than even on our wedding day, if that is possible." "It is possible," Austin assured her, "because I feel the same way. Every day with you is better than the last." They sat together as the sky darkened and the stars emerged, holding hands and watching the land they had built their life upon. In the distance, they could hear cattle lowing and the sound of horses in the stable. Closer, through the open window, they could hear Daniel playing with his toy soldiers and humming to himself. "No regrets?" Catherine asked softly. "Not a single one," Austin replied. "Everything I have, everything I am, comes back to that rainy night and the choice to open my door. Best decision I ever made." "Come in, both of you," Catherine quoted with a smile. "Come in, both of you," Austin echoed. 3 words that changed the course of my entire life. As the years continued their relentless march forward, Austin and Catherine grew older but no less devoted to each other. They celebrated 20 years of marriage, then 25, then 30. Their children gave them more grandchildren, and the ranch that had started as a modest operation became a true legacy, passed down through generations. Tommy and Samuel ran the ranch together now, their different skills complementing each other perfectly. The twins had both achieved their dreams. Clara ran a successful horse training operation, and Caroline had indeed become a doctor, one of the first women physicians in Dallas. Daniel, following in his brother Tommy's footsteps, was learning the cattle business and proving himself just as capable as his older brothers. Austin's hair had gone silver, and Catherine's blonde had faded to white, but they still held hands whenever they walked and still danced together in the kitchen when the mood struck. Their love had not diminished with age. If anything, it had grown stronger, tempered by decades of partnership and devotion. On a warm evening in May of 1903, exactly 30 years after Catherine had knocked on Austin's door, the family gathered for a celebration. All 5 of their children were there, along with their spouses and children, and the house and grounds were filled with laughter and music and love. Tommy, now 37 and the father of 5 himself, stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass. "Austin and Catherine Garrett, who taught us all what it means to build a life on love and hard work. Ma, you have told me the story of how you came to be here, how Dad opened his door to you and me when we had nowhere else to go. I want you both to know that I understand now, as a father myself, what an incredible act of courage and kindness that was. Dad, you took on a stranger and an infant without hesitation, and you have been the best father I could have asked for. You raised me as your own and never made me feel like I was anything less than your true son." Catherine was crying openly, and Austin's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Samuel stood next. "To the best parents anyone could ask for. You taught us the value of honesty, the importance of family, and the power of love. Everything good in my life comes from the foundation you built." Clara and Caroline spoke together, telling stories of their childhood and thanking their parents for supporting their unconventional dreams. Daniel, now 27 and recently engaged, thanked them for their example of what a good marriage looked like. Finally, Austin stood, pulling Catherine to her feet beside him. 30 years ago, this incredible woman knocked on my door in a rainstorm, holding a baby and asking for help. I was a bachelor rancher, lonely and set in my ways, and I had no idea that opening that door would be the most important thing I would ever do. Catherine, you have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. Tommy, Samuel, Clara, Caroline, Daniel, all of you are proof that love can create miracles. From one desperate knock in the rain to this, a family spanning 3 generations and more love than one man has any right to possess. I am grateful for every moment, every challenge, every joy. Thank you, my darling wife, for choosing to trust me all those years ago." He kissed her then, in front of all their children and grandchildren, and the room erupted in cheers and applause. Catherine, when she could speak, said simply, "Thank you for saying come in, both of you. Thank you for saving us and loving us and building this beautiful life. I love you, Austin Garrett, today and always." The celebration continued late into the night, with music and dancing and stories shared across generations. Catherine watched her family, all the people who existed because of one rainy night and one cowboy's kindness, and felt her heart might burst from happiness. Later, when the guests had gone home and the house was quiet, Catherine and Austin walked out to the porch, their favorite spot to watch the stars. "You think Sarah knows?" Catherine asked softly. "About all of this, about how well Tommy turned out?" "I think she knows," Austin said, pulling her close. "And I think she is grateful that her son had such a good life, that he was loved and cared for and given every opportunity. He thinks of you as his real father, you know. I think of him as my real son. Blood does not make a family, Catherine. We have proven that a dozen times over." She rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and horses and home. What do you suppose would have happened if I had knocked on someone else's door that night? Do not even think such things, Austin said with a shudder. The universe knew what it was doing bringing you to me. Some things are just meant to be. Do you believe in fate? I believe in us, Austin replied. I believe that the best things in life come from choosing love, from opening your door and your heart to those in need. I believe we were meant to find each other, one way or another. Catherine turned in his arms and kissed him, still feeling that same flutter of excitement she had felt on their wedding night all those years ago. Some things never faded, and the love between them was one of those eternal things. I would do it all again, she whispered against his lips. Every hardship, every struggle, every moment of fear and uncertainty. I would do it all again to end up right here with you. As would I, Austin agreed, 1,000 times over. They stood together under the Texas stars, two people who had built a life and a legacy from nothing but trust and kindness and love. The ranch house behind them was quiet now, but it would wake again tomorrow to the sounds of family and laughter, the ongoing story of the Garrett family continuing into the future. Catherine thought of that desperate woman who had knocked on a stranger's door in the rain, holding a baby and praying for mercy. She thought of the cowboy who had opened that door without hesitation, who had said 4 simple words that changed everything. She thought of all the years between then and now, all the moments of joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle, and she was grateful for all of it, because that rainy night had given her everything: a home, a family, a love that transcended time and circumstance. Austin had saved her and Tommy when they needed it most, and in return, she had given him the family he had always longed for. They had saved each other, just as Austin said, and built something beautiful in the process. As they finally turned to go inside, Austin paused and looked back at the door, the same door Catherine had knocked on 30 years earlier. You know, he said thoughtfully, I should have that door bronzed or something, put up a plaque commemorating the night my life truly began. Catherine laughed, the sound bright and joyful in the darkness. You are ridiculous. I am in love, he corrected. There is a difference. There really is not, she teased, but she was smiling as they walked inside together, closing the door on another beautiful day and looking forward to all the beautiful days yet to come. The years continued to be kind to the Garrett family. Austin and Catherine lived to see their children's children grow up and have children of their own. The ranch prospered under Tommy and Samuel's management, and the Garrett name became synonymous with quality and integrity throughout Texas. Austin passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1920, at the age of 72, with Catherine holding his hand. His last words were, I love you, darling girl. Thank you for knocking on my door. Catherine lived for another 8 years, surrounded by the family she and Austin had created, telling stories to great-grandchildren about the cowboy who had opened his door to a desperate woman in the rain. She spoke of love and kindness, of taking chances and trusting your heart, of building something lasting through dedication and devotion. When she passed in 1928, at the age of 79, she was laid to rest beside Austin on the ranch they had built together. Their children ensured that the story of their meeting was preserved, passed down through generations as an example of how love could bloom in the most unlikely circumstances. The ranch house stood for decades more, a monument to their legacy. The door Catherine had knocked on that fateful night was indeed preserved, eventually housed in a glass case in the main house with a plaque that read, Through this door came love, family, and hope. May we always remember to open our doors to those in need, as Austin Garrett did on a rainy night in May of 1873. Tommy lived to be 90, long enough to see his own great-great-grandchildren, and he never forgot the father who had raised him with such love and the mother who had walked through storms to keep him safe. He told their story often, wanting everyone to know about the power of simple kindness and the miracle that could come from 3 words. Come in, both of you. The Garrett family line continued strong, each generation learning the values Austin and Catherine had established: hard work, integrity, compassion, and above all, love. The ranch itself remained in family hands, a living testament to what 2 people could build when they opened their hearts to each other. And somewhere, in whatever place souls go when they leave this world, Sarah smiled knowing her son had lived a beautiful life full of love and opportunity, knowing that her sister had found happiness beyond measure, knowing that the desperate decision to board that stagecoach all those years ago had led to something wonderful, even if she had not lived to see it. Because sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest futures. Sometimes a knock on a door in a rainstorm is the beginning of a love story that spans generations. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to say, "Come in, both of you," to change the course of countless lives. And in the end, that is exactly what happened on a rainy night in Dallas, Texas, in 1873, when a cowboy named Austin Garrett opened his door to a woman named Catherine Zimmerman and a baby named Thomas, and in doing so, opened the door to a lifetime of love.